People call Lyonel Baratheon the laughing storm. Everyone understands the first word, but almost nobody understands the second. Underneath all that noise is a man who strips away everything in people that isn't nailed down like a storm. And you can watch him do it to Dunk, beat by beat. By the end, you stop seeing him as just a fun character and start realizing there's a lot more going on underneath him than you first think. And it all happens inside this tent, in just 10 minutes. Dunk sits in his chair stiff, eyes down. He doesn't want attention, like always. He's performing smallness because deep down, he thinks he doesn't belong in a room like this. And then he sees Lyonel. He expected him to be bigger because of all the stories he heard about him. But the thing that makes Lyonel feel big has nothing to do with physical size. It's his personality. And the very first speech that Lyonel gives is the proof.
I've had a profound thought, if anyone would care to listen.
Fuck was it gonna say? Please tell me.
Get 100 goals and a man beats no god who sticks me best. Oh, your best!
Tent is full of lords and knights. This man stops them to say something and literally forgets what he was going to say. And instead of trying to recover it, instead of pretending he had it under control like any other lord would, he just goes, "Kid," and throws 100 gold into the room. And somehow, buried underneath all the drunken nonsense, he's actually making a point about how stags basically invented jousting. Nobody is annoyed, nobody rolls their eyes, he just stopped an entire feast to say nothing and the room actually cheers. Sure, part of that is respect. He is a lord after all. But from Lyonel's perspective, it doesn't matter if people think he's talking nonsense or that he's drunk or even a fool. He doesn't care how he's perceived. And that's part of what makes him the Storm, being so secure in himself that he doesn't bend to fit the room. He makes the room bend around him instead, the exact opposite of what Dunk does. And this is exactly what Lyonel notices when he sees Dunk. At first glance, it looks like a plot convenience. A lord like Lyonel spots a no-name hedge knight and befriends him in one night. It feels like the show added it to make Dunk's story richer. But when you see how Lyonel and Dunk contrast each other, it starts to make sense. Because you can tell, both in this scene and the ones after, that Lyonel has a strong sense of community. His tent is loud, open, alive. People are singing, dancing, talking over each other, and then this outsider walks in acting like he doesn't belong there, trying to disappear. To Lyonel, that means something is wrong, and the second he approaches him, the storm starts doing its work.
You ever been punched in the face before? I beg your pardon, Sir Lyon? Big men get punched more than little men. Did you know that? No, but I believe it.
Before any formal introduction or any lordly courtesy, Lyonel immediately points out the one thing that feels unnatural to him. That's an important detail about Lyonel's character. For someone who values authenticity this much, pretending to be less than what you are almost feels disrespectful, not just to yourself, but to everyone around you.
Seven above gave you tallness, so be tall. Or I will name you a heretic and burn you. Drown you. Drop you off a tall, I don't know. What do they do to heretics?
That's why when Dunk says he means no disrespect, Lyonel's response becomes the line that defines Dunk for the rest of the story. His two words are become what Dunk, who he is, sure, but listen to the word Lyonel uses right after, heretic. We call people heretics when they deny something sacred, and Lyonel is looking at a man who was given this size and is apologizing for it, shrinking from it. And to Lyonel, that's not just weakness, it's blasphemy. Be tall isn't stand up straight. Be tall means believe in what you are. And then he can't even finish the threat. He just delivered one of the most profound lines in the scene, and he buried it inside a joke so clumsy that you almost miss what he actually said. He never lets his wisdom feel heavy. He throws truth sideways and moves on. And what comes next feels like another push. The storm doing its work again, slowly stripping away the shell Dunk walked into the tent with. And I want you to pay attention to the food Dunk is holding, because even that feels carefully placed. By the end of the scene, everything comes back to that.
What have you brought me? Sir, begging your pardons, I didn't realize. You wish to curry my favor, sir. Yet you come with an empty hand.
Lyonel isn't a fool. He's true to himself, but he's not naive. He understands exactly how the world works. The second he starts questioning Dunk, he pushes him into two choices. Either you came here because you want something, or you came here for my head. And what's interesting is watching Dunk try to escape both. Even now, he's still hiding behind knightly manners, apologizing, begging pardon, trying to sound proper. Meanwhile, the entire reason he came into the tent is sitting right there in his hands. And you can actually see him glance at it for a second. Like part of him knows the truth is obvious now, but he still refuses to come out of his shell. So Lyonel keeps pushing. He keeps digging past the performance, accusing him more directly, forcing Dunk closer and closer to the truth until there's nowhere left to hide. And finally, he just asks him outright why he's really there.
Then why the fuck are you in my tent?
So suppers. Actually makes sense.
Lyonel pushes him so hard that Dunk finally blurts out the truth he was literally holding in his hands the entire time. And Lyonel's reaction is perfect. He doesn't look down on him. He doesn't treat him like some pathetic poor hedge knight sneaking into a lord's tent for food. He accepts the answer completely, gives it the same weight and honesty Dunk gave him, and that's important because Lyonel's acceptance never comes from above. It's not a lord entertaining a commoner. It feels genuine. That's the moment he truly starts liking Dunk, and then comes the cherry on top.
Do you like dancing?
Doesn't everyone?
Look at Lyonel here. This time, he steps closer when he asks it, softer, warmer, and Dunk's answer reveals something else about who he is. And when you think about it, that answer makes perfect sense for Dunk. The only people who don't like dancing or singing or moments of joy are usually people completely consumed by the idea of themselves, people too guarded to let go. Even this is a proof of how Lyonel's approach slowly comes down to who really Dunk is. He is slowly opening up. Look at how Dunk starts to dance. He is still holding back. He looks around that like he doesn't want to do something wrong, while Lyonel is doing his own thing, nothing like what everyone does. And then they come face to face. Lyonel starts to challenge him again. He steps on Dunk's foot. Dunk hurts but keeps going. He understands the rules and tries to dodge this time, and he is successful, but Lyonel keeps pushing. Dunk covers and runs, and in the end, he finds the perfect opening and steps on Lyonel's foot. And Lyonel just laughs. I mean, this is genius writing. The exact same thing we just saw happening in the table happens exactly the same in the dance floor. Even the moment where Lyonel spins Dunk around feels symbolic of what's happening to him through this entire scene. Lyonel doesn't turn Dunk into someone else. He doesn't give him confidence or joy or freedom that wasn't already there. He just pulls it out of him, like a storm ripping away everything unnecessary until only the real thing is left. And in the next hours of the night, that's exactly what's left. Dunk and Lyonel sit quietly and talk about life. First of all, notice the crown on Dunk's head. In the world of Westeros, crowns are the symbol of power. If you wear the crown, you hold the power. But here, it's sitting on the head of a hedge knight, a nobody, and it doesn't even bother the real lord. And that detail says a lot about Lyonel. At some point in his life, he's understood something fundamental about power, the same idea Tywin Lannister expresses.
You really think a crown gives you power?
No.
Because it doesn't. And this moment quietly proves that Lyonel operates on that same level of understanding, almost Tywin-level awareness of how power actually works. But the difference is what they do with it. Tywin uses narrative, fear, and ruthlessness to hold power in place. Lyonel doesn't need to build control around it. He relies on something else entirely, unfiltered presence. And we can understand this works by looking at the books, where Master Yandel says, Lyonel Baratheon brought glory to House Baratheon and was a great favorite of the small folk. And in seconds, he casually explains how to reach that level.
The swells heaves, you could lick salt from the air. But I come to find what men do when they die at sea. So drove I on into the storm. Within every man there are many men. That I had to do, Stormlanders had always done. And if they had done it, I could do it too.
When the showrunner was briefing the actor Daniel Ings, he described the character as Ernest Hemingway meets Jack Sparrow. Hemingway was a man who went to wars he didn't need to fight. He sailed, he boxed, he hunted animals that could kill him because he needed to know what he was made of. That's Lyonel sitting in that tent, telling Dunk he sailed into a storm to find out what men do when they die at sea. And the way Hemingway wrote, Short, plain, no decoration. He trusted you to feel what was underneath without spelling it out. That's how Lyonel talks. Be tall. The depth is always underneath, never on the surface. And then Jack Sparrow is the other half. The chaos, the drunk energy, forgetting his own speech, throwing gold at a room for no reason, dancing like nobody's watching. The part of Lyonel that makes you laugh before you realize he just said something profound. And this creates a space so real and valuable that the man who walked in like a bride on her wedding night starts to open up.
I agonize a lot. Sometimes I think I agonize too much, and I just end up agonizing over that.
Dunk's words here are genuine concern about himself. The man who tries to present himself as a knight starts to show insecurity and fear, and Lyonel's answers are still very different from what you would expect from any other man in this situation. At this point, the scene almost starts to position him as a mentor, the wise fisherman, someone who is supposed to give advice and direction, but Lyonel is not playing that role. He tells Dunk what he sees, not what he wants to hear or what would lift him up. And when Dunk asks him what he should do, he simply says, "I don't know," because that's the truth. People love Lyonel Baratheon. The internet calls him the best character in the franchise. They compare him to Tyrion. They say he redeems House Baratheon. They say he's funny, charismatic, the life of the party. All true. But that's just the laughing. The storm is what he does to the people around him. He walks into a room and the masks start falling off. Not because he rips them away, but because you can't pretend around a man who isn't pretending. His authenticity doesn't just free him. It frees everyone in his orbit. That's why Dunk danced. That's why Dunk told him the truth. That's why Dunk wore his crown. And this isn't just a Westeros thing. You see it in real life too. Certain people just have that effect. People who walk into a room and you can immediately feel they're not performing. And that kind of presence is rare, because most of us, most of the time, are managing how we're seen, adjusting, filtering, editing ourselves depending on who's in front of us. But when someone drops that completely, even for a moment, it changes the space around them. Not because they're trying to influence anyone, but because there's nothing artificial left to push against. And people respond to that instinctively. That's the pull. That's what people are really pointing at when they say they like someone's energy. It's not energy in the abstract, it's the absence of performance. Lyonel Baratheon has that. In a world of schemers and performers, he's the only man who is just himself. And the terrifying thing is, it works. Better than scheming, better than performance. He earns more loyalty in one drunken night than most lords buy in a lifetime. You can't mock a man who's already free. And you can't hide from a storm. If you made it this far, thank you. Every comment, every like, it means more than you think. It keeps me going. I'll see you in the next one.